Welcome back to Reddit from Reddit. Today we're taking a look at the AskReddit, waiters and waitresses. What is the worst first date you've witnessed? A couple in their mid-20s comes in. It's obviously a first date, but they seem to really like each other and are getting along well. I wasn't serving them, however. I was serving the table next to them. About halfway through their meal, I noticed them holding hands over the table. Cute. Then the guy lifts her hands to his lips and kisses the back of it. A bit of an outdated gesture, but still cute, I guess. The woman seems slightly confused, but goes along with it. A little while later, I see the guy do it again. Okay, dude. Then again, woman is confused and looks a little uncomfortable. They are no longer holding hands. I go to serve my table and see the dude full on making out with her hand, tongue and all. Woman looks extremely embarrassed and uncomfortable, looking everywhere but at her date. I go over and casually ask if they need anything, and the dude stops. Woman yanks her hand back. She left pretty soon after. Pretty sure historically you were supposed to bow your face over her hand, and it became like a Regency novel romance thing for the gentleman to steal a kiss without milady's chaperone knowing. Source, I like history and books with shirtless men on the front where I can enjoy the story and not have to think too hard. Not a server, but a bartender. My girlfriend was serving an obvious first date, and they were ordering an alarming amount of drinks within 30 minutes of sitting down. I asked my girlfriend what was going on, and she said the girl was doing all of the shots they ordered. I walked from behind the bar to the bathroom purely to check in on the situation, and good lord, this girl on the date was blasted and just saying F every other word. Eventually, the chick went outside to smoke, and the dude beelined to the bar and asked if he could give me money for the waitress and sneak out. Actually gave $200 for a $70 tab. So nice. The girl came back in and ate the food they ordered, then tried to order more drinks. Had to throw her out, and she started calling me the N-word. I am very much a white dude. Bizarre night that my girl and I still talk about years later. This probably doesn't compare to some of the freak show stories, but I'll tell it anyways. I worked for IHOP for a very long 3 months. Most of my experiences were decent. On one occasion, one of my acquaintances came in with a date. We had been friends as kids and still sometimes chatted amicably. At this time, I had a stutter that would happen if I spoke too quickly, was stressed, or just trying to speak hard words. I went up to their table, said hi to my friend and her date, and instantly flubbed the greeting with a stutter. Honestly, my stutter has never bothered me, never felt like a bad thing until that moment. Her date looked at me, did that little condescending laugh that we've all heard before, and then repeated what I said while mocking my stutter. I could see my friend physically recoil from him, her face clearly showing a "did you really just act that way" expression. At the time, I just brushed it off. It bothered me for about 2 seconds in the moment, but even years later, I still haven't forgotten. Still, I could tell with that one little moment of buttholery, my friend was not going to go on a second date with him. As well she shouldn't. Absolutely uncalled for. My mom went on a date with a guy who picked her up in a fancy car when she was young. She pointed out a cute rabbit eating grass near the side of the road, so he sped up and hit it on purpose, trying to impress her. Instead, she cried and made him take her home instantly. She met my dad not long after. I once saw a guy try and impress his date by pretending to know about wine. He then proceeded to pronounce every single one wrong. I don't even know how I would phonetically write out his butchering of Chablis and Chavon Blanc. Date looked at him like he'd just taken a crap on the table. S'establish suave ignon. Oh man, thanks for asking this one. I've got a great one. Happened at my former restaurant. Reservation for 6 o'clock. Young guy comes in a few minutes early, tells me he's kind of nervous because it's a first date and he hasn't had many before, blah, blah, blah. Kind of sweet, really. Anyways, girl arrives about half an hour late and proceeds to get very, very drunk. About midway through the meal, she answers her phone, takes the call, and starts talking about her date in front of her date, saying stuff like, well, he's not usually my type. I don't exactly like him, but I felt like, why not? Right in front of him. Young man looks so discouraged, walks up to me, pays his bill, and leaves. He's a really nice guy. He's come to the place I work at now a few times. Wow, he is that inexperienced, but still not desperate. Good for him. Seems like the kind of situation where it'd be perfectly reasonable for him to leave her with the tab. I'm not service staff, but I often eat and drink alone and people watch, and first dates are almost always painfully obvious. Worst one I ever saw? 2 people who were probably perfect for each other. They were both completely self-absorbed. How completely? They both started stories and kept telling them at the same time. They weren't even listening. just talking at each other. I was enraptured by the sheer insanity of it. I didn't eat for like 45 minutes as they both just yapped away, barely stopping. Hello, fellow person who eats alone. There was a couple sitting at the bar, very clearly on a first date. About 20 minutes later, I was back in the kitchen rolling silverware, and the guy comes running back into the kitchen and says, "Is there an exit back here?" Didn't wait for a response, saw the exit sign, and bolted out the back door. This isn't as bad as some of the others, but the guy and the girl arrived separately and seemed like they were meeting for the first time at the restaurant. They sat down, then the girl excused herself and went to the bathroom. The guy ordered drinks for both of them while she was gone. After like 30 minutes, ordered 2 meals. It was so obvious she wasn't coming back, but he kept calling her and eventually just left all the food and drink untouched and paid the bill. I would totally eat both dinners. This is heartbreaking. My heart physically hurt when the story got to that line of after like 30 minutes he ordered 2 meals. At that point, it's either bewildering denial or insanity. He reached for his water and punched it directly into her lap. During my first date with my now boyfriend, he reached across the table and hit a ceramic mug which flew off the table and shattered onto my unsuspecting toes. I was picking ceramic shards out of my foot for the rest of the day. That's one way to make a girl wet. I do this to my wife, like once every other year. Last time I punched a full 32-ounce Maybach over, and I swear every last drop poured neatly into her purse. It's been a while since that happened, and I don't know how I'm going to top that one. Bartended for a decade. For a while, I was at a medium-range Italian restaurant. More than once, I saw a first date go awry because one of the two drank too much. Most memorable was a woman who started downing rum punches. They were at a table, so I couldn't see them, and I guess the waiter had forgotten his red light, yellow light training. I don't know if they still do that. After the 6th one, I asked if these were all going to the same person, and he said yes. I was like, oh crap. Sure enough, girl ended up puking all over my bathroom and locking herself in. When we got the door open, she was passed out and there was puke everywhere, including all over her. No cab would touch her, so the guy ended up taking her home. He came in a week later and said that they were going on another date. I was skeptical. They've been married for about 15 years and are absurdly happy. She avoids rum punches. That's oddly wholesome, except for all the puke, of course. I work at a pretty high-end steakhouse. I got sat with a table of 2, and when I greeted them, I assumed they were a couple. It took them quite a while to order their food. I had to go back quite a few times and ask if they were ready. After an hour of them talking, ordering cocktails, and looking at the menu, they finally ordered. The woman ordered a filet mignon, and the guy ordered our most expensive steak. Right before their food came out, I saw the guy get up and walk towards the bathroom. My coworkers ran their food to their table, and the woman sat there with all of the food in front of her. I thought he was coming back soon, but around 20 minutes went by, and there was no sign of him. My manager walked over to me and asked me what was up with them. I said the guy was in the bathroom. My manager went and asked her if she wanted us to keep the food under the warmer. She said yes, and the food was under the warmer for maybe an hour while she sat at the table alone. I walked over to her and asked if everything was all right. She immediately broke down, said it was their first date, and that they met on Tinder. Apparently she told him that a steakhouse was a little much for a first date and suggested coffee instead, but he said no. As they were sitting there talking, he looked at his phone and said, "My daughter has an emergency," and quickly got up and left. She was texting him and he never replied. The girl bawled to me for 20 minutes, repeatedly saying, "What's wrong with me?" And I had to reassure her he doesn't know what he's missing, blah, blah, blah. I went over to my manager and asked what we should do about the check. He said he was stuck because it was a $250 tab, and that's just too much to not have her pay. After a few minutes of convincing him, I got him to take everything off the bill. I boxed up all the food, including his steak and sides, brought it over to her, and told her to enjoy her night. She stopped crying, thanked me, and left. After writing this, I'm now wondering if they swindled me. Would have been a hell of a ploy, all for some good meat. Steak that's been under the heat lamp for an hour isn't going to be that great, though. They'd have enjoyed their evening and food more if they'd stayed to eat and then found a hair in it 3/4 of the way through the plate. There was this young guy eating dinner with his mom. I noticed they seemed weirdly uncomfortable and distant, but didn't think much of it. Turns out this lady was not his mom. He had met her on a dating site and had been very clearly catfished. This lady was at least a good 20 years older than him. When she left the restaurant, he stayed behind and told me about what happened, and then asked me out. I politely declined, but agreed with him that it was a really weird situation. This actually happened to me. Expected to meet a girl at the restaurant who was around my age at the time, 27, but it was a woman closer to 50. She was my age when I was born. We had nothing in common. I'm pretty sure she was using her daughter's pictures on her profile. Plot twist, it actually was his mother wingmanning for him by pretending to be an older lady who catfished him so he could score a sympathy date with you. I'm a bartender at a popular burger and wine bar. I had an older gentleman, about 60 years old, come in on a Wednesday evening and order a bottle of wine and 2 glasses as he's waiting for someone to show. This other older woman shows up a short while later, and both of them hit it off. They sat themselves right behind my POS, so basically anytime I had to ring something in, I had a front row seat to their date. Both of them crushed 3 bottles of wine and sit there for about 4 hours talking away. Around the 4th hour of them sitting, they both started making out randomly and will not stop. They started sucking faces with an uncomfortable intensity, somewhat terrifying all my bar guests and myself. At one point, the older fella leaves for the bathroom, and his date proceeds to let me know it's their first time meeting. Not entirely the worst first date for them, I suppose, but definitely was for me and the other customers. Damn. Am I just a prude, or does 3 bottles between 2 people sound like sloppy drunk level for most people? Not a waiter, but me and my girlfriend sat next to an obvious first date at a Pan-Asian fusion restaurant, Zen in Durham, UK. She comments that her main course wasn't quite what she expected and thought it'd be spicier. He then snaps his fingers above his head very loudly, so half the restaurant turns around to look, and a waitress rolls her eyes and goes over. He demands that they cook it again and make it hotter. Next thing, there's half a dozen Thai waitresses around the table calling him worse than crap in Thai, my Thai girlfriend translated, causing a massive scene while her face turns red and they take her plate away. She then has to sit with no food while he continues eating. He eventually realizes he's screwed up and stops eating, but she sarcastically tells him to enjoy his food. They brought her a fresh plate and they eat in silence. First, and I'm sure the last date. I don't care how hungry I was, I would not eat whatever was put on that girl's new plate. I was hanging out at Starbucks and witnessed a horrible date. She was Japanese, and he started off by showing her his shirt with sumo wrestlers on it. Then would ask questions like, "What's your favorite sushi? Do you only speak Japanese? How do you say toilet in Japanese? They have sumo in Japan, right? Did you see my shirt?" It was so amazingly awkward, I bought another cup of coffee to listen to the entire thing. Is that the Starbucks version of getting your popcorn so you can sit back and watch? Do you only speak Japanese? Assuming he didn't speak Japanese, how is this question only being asked now? I had a table I'm pretty sure was a married couple, in their 50s, clearly together, etc. So call it a date anyways, as they were out for dinner together, so it qualifies in a way. They both ordered draft beer. When I was bringing it out, I came to the table and the woman was screaming and crying uncontrollably, the man bending over her. I thought she was having a medical emergency. Turns out she got a call that a parent had died. The man turned to me and shoved a card at me, asking to pay because they have to leave as soon as possible. And I said it was okay. They had not had anything. I was still holding the beers. And get this, I got a write-up for doing this. As if I was going to make these people pay for 2 beers they never even sipped because a genuine emergency happened so that a big giant corporation can add $12 to the $600 million. You're a good person. I had a 2-top and a small booth, and across from them was a family of 6. The 2-top was in their mid-40s, maybe 50. I was delivering food to the 6-top, and I was being berated for not using legs with my big tray, so I grabbed a pair and headed off. When I was setting them down, a stacked plate on my tray shifted to the side, and the whole tray pitched toward the 6-top. I panicked and tried to stop it from falling, and it all went backwards off the tray. Unluckily, I didn't hear a single plate shatter. I turned around, and the woman at the 2-top had rib sauce on her face, mashed potato in her bust, and broccoli all over her lap. I started with, "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Please stand up and we'll get you cleaned up." My 6-top was forgotten at that moment. I pleaded with her to get up so we could clean her off. Someone produced a towel for me. I had 2 managers trying to help. She was so polite and insistent that it was nobody's fault. Her husband finally said, "At least wipe the sauce off your face," and she laughed and got up. Everything was comped on their ticket, including alcohol. It was the only tray I ever dropped, and they never made me use legs again. They came back in and asked for me the next week. The husband told me they were celebrating 30 years together that night. I felt horrible. Then he told me on their first date, she made spaghetti and accidentally dumped it in his lap. He told her it was karma, and they had a huge laugh and a free meal. That's just wholesome and adorable. I'm glad they were such good sports about it. Some people would have lost their minds. A couple years ago, I was tending bar at a high-end steak joint. A pretty brunette walked in and sat down at the bar. After fixing her a cocktail, I asked if she'd like to see a dinner menu. She explained that she was waiting for a date. A few moments later, the guy arrived carrying a large bag. It It was immediately obvious this date was their first. Their conversation was lurching from forced to downright painful when he reached into the bag and pulled out an album containing his Pokemon card collection. He set the book on the bar and thumbed through each page, thoroughly and lovingly describing every card, attempting to educate his date in the ways of Japanese pocket monsters. I'll be fair to the guy, dude was passionate. She feigned an emergency and called her friend to pick her up. He stayed and ate a plain hamburger at the bar. Both of these people were in their mid-30s. If showing a girl your holographic Charizard doesn't get you laid, then I don't know what will. Why do I have a feeling it was really two 10-year-olds in trench coats? A little more charm, and their pants would have come off. I have no idea if they were on a date or been married for too long, but this. We had our flight canceled due to a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. The only place open for dinner was an Indian restaurant. There were a few customers in there. It was an interesting looking bunch, sort of what you'd expect eating out on Christmas Eve. This one couple, though, looked to be in their 40s, a guy and a woman. She never said a word and looked like she was in a trance. The guy, though, kept talking to her in this slow monotone. And another thing I hate about you. And proceeded to critique her while she continued to stare into space. Sounds like a long-term abusive relationship. At some point, she mentally checked out because she's heard it all before. Hopefully, she eventually ditched him. Girl and guy came into the barbecue restaurant I worked at. They met at the door exchanging the usual, hi, nice to meet you, etc. The guy was a complete jerk. She ordered ribs, and he said, do you want to keep that hot figure of yours or look like that chick over there? Points to the slightly overweight woman. Then, when they were waiting to pay, he starts flirting with the chick behind them. She straight up waited until he paid, and then left without waiting for the food. Meets girl at barbecue place. Girl orders barbecue. Tells girl if she eats barbecue, she'll get fat. That's a bold strategy, Cotton. I served a table where the woman looked frightened and had a body language like she's leaning away from the guy while gathered tight. My coworkers would ask me if she's okay after they passed through my section. The guy was sitting and leaning over the table, looked like he was invading her space. Angry looking guy. He talked to her like she was a dog that just pissed on the rug. When he went to the bathroom, I asked if she was okay and she said yes. I doubt he got a second date though. Not a waiter, but I cannot miss this opportunity to share this story. Friend and I meet up at a chain restaurant for a meal and a catch-up. In the booth across from us are a guy and a girl in their 20s, very obviously on a date. Things seem to be going moderately well. Well, just kind of let them do their thing in the background as my friend and I chat about life and stuff. Then, guy stands up halfway through the girl's sentence, cutting her off. It's quite a violent standing, so draws the attention of most tables nearby. Guy then says this in a way that makes me think he has rehearsed. I'm sorry, Jen. I just wanted to give women one more chance, but I can't do it. You're lively, but women just aren't doing it for me. Guy throws some money on the table and walks out. Jen kind of sits there with everyone looking at her, going redder and redder. Lovely waitress swoops in and saves the day for her, but wow. Never seen anything that completely insane before, or since. At least just wait for the date to be over and politely decline a second. Too long didn't read, guy decides he was gay mid-hetero date, stands up, loudly renounces women, and leaves his date embarrassed as all hell. I'm a host at a restaurant, but my first week working, a gay couple got into a fight in the middle of their meal, drawing attention from everyone in the restaurant. Before my manager could step in and stop it, one stood up and shouted, "You're the reason most people are straight," and left. I always thought about how it is both a roast or compliment depending on sexuality. Witness a couple on their first date having a few drinks. Started making out by the third. Dude cried by the fourth. Started sucking on her finger. Cried again. Abruptly ran out of the bar and down the street. She paid. Came back 2 weeks later. I pretended not to have recognized him to be nice. And he brought it up. I think you served me on a date 2 weeks ago. I don't know, man. I serve a lot of people. Yeah, it was you, remember? I cried and ran away. Bruh. I can't tell if this is a power move. Bruh. And that's the end of this Ask Reddit. Waiters and waitresses, what is the worst first date you've witnessed? Let us know your worst first date stories down below in the comments. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button, get subscribed to Reddit from Reddit, and share this video with your friends so that you can rejoice over other people's bad first dates. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.